Good afternoon, welcome here. My name is Delilah if you are new, and today you are joining me as I make a lot of food. There are a lot of people in our lives who are going through some really rough stuff right now. I want to help out in the best way I know how, and that is through food. I know for myself how much it means to me when people offer meals when we're going through something rough or postpartum or, just really challenging times. And I want to extend that same love and care to those who need it right now. I've made a long list of various meals and baking and goods to make over the next week or so. I'm going to package them all up in these individual disposable containers. Normally I would do like Ziploc bags and do it family style and like pack all the meal in one Ziploc bag and freeze it that way. But because of the circumstances of the people I'm bringing food to, I think this would just work a little bit better for them. So I've got my containers ready to go. We went to the grocery store yesterday, stocked up on a lot of items, and I'm just gonna go crazy cooking a whole lot of food. And I thought I would bring you along with me because I know how much you all loved my freezer meal prep when I was pregnant with Annabeth. I don't do this very often, but it's something I want to start doing more. I remember how lovely it was to just have those meals in the freezer ready to go. And there have been a number of times since then that I have wished for ready to go meals because we're just in a rush or whatever circumstance we're in. So we're stocking up today. These meals are going to be pre-made meals, so almost everything will be fully cooked and basically just ready to be warmed up and eaten. It is a little bit more work for me right now, but in the long run, it'll be much easier for us later and for the people that we're bringing meals to as well. So with that being said, I've got like a 4-hour window here and I'm going to use it to the best of my ability. I've got a whole lot of meat thawed and ready to go in the fridge. This thing is packed full right now. We've got a lot of chicken, we've got a lot of beef, and I think today we're going to begin with the beef recipes. So I've got 3 different recipes I'm going to try and make today. I think before we dive into this, I'm going to get started with a batch of buns so that can rise while I cook. I'm gonna go throw out my hair, I'm gonna turn on some worship music, and we're gonna get cooking. So starting off with the buns, I make all of my buns, breads, any sort of bread good I make from scratch, just because I really don't like the ingredients that are in breads and buns and goods at the grocery store. So it took a while for me to adjust to this, but now that I've been doing it for so long, it's not actually that hard, and I found recipes that really work for me. So this one is my favorite for sub buns, burger buns, hot dog buns. It is a sourdough recipe, but it also has yeast, so it rises quickly and it doesn't take all day to make. I can easily make these in a morning or an afternoon. I will leave the recipes linked down below, but I like to get this started first before getting into anything else so that it can rise while I cook. So the first recipe we're getting started with is homemade burgers. This is another thing that I haven't bought from the grocery store in a really long time, mostly because it's just really, really easy to make at home and so much better made from home. So this is a double recipe, but not really a recipe at all because I don't have a recipe for burgers. It's just lots of beef, a couple eggs, some breadcrumbs, or in this case I actually used blitzed oats. And then for flavorings I do what my mom always did. I add ketchup, mustard, sometimes barbecue sauce. This time I added the Japanese whatever it's called from Costco. Of course I do salt and pepper, sometimes oregano, garlic powder, onion powder. I just kind of add flavors and it tastes good every single time. This is the only meal that I did not cook. I froze them just like this, and then later I put them into a Ziploc bag. Some time ago, I made these honey barbecue meatballs for my family, and it has since been a family favorite. This recipe I have made countless times, and I'm sure I've shared it countless times. It starts with lots of ground beef, egg, breadcrumbs, there's Parmesan cheese in there. The recipe calls for parsley, I use oregano. There's lots of really good flavors in here. I'm doing a 3 times batch today, so I knew I would be standing by the counter rolling meatballs for a very, very long time. I got 3 pans worth of meatballs out of this, but I like this recipe because it freezes really well. And it's just one of those really good comforting meals. It's great for summertime, it's great for winter time, and everyone who's had them really enjoys them. So it's one that I like to bring to other people because it's generally well loved. While those went in the oven, I got some rice cooking. I just did simple butter rice with some salt. I did a giant pot of this so that I could make a lot of meals. Coming back to the buns, they had now risen enough that I could divide them and shape them. This is a really fun process for me, honestly. If I didn't enjoy making breads and buns from home, I probably wouldn't be doing it. But it's really fun for me, it's really simple. The kids really enjoy getting involved with this too. And this recipe works out really well because it makes 8 buns, and my burger recipe makes 8 burgers. So every time I make a single burger recipe, I can make a single bun recipe, and I know that we're gonna have the perfect amount. While all of this was going, I was also making a couple loaves of bread. This is something that I do on a very, very regular basis, at least once or twice a week. And I like to just have it pre-made and ready to go in the freezer. So while this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the meals that I'm making today, it's a great thing to have on hand. The sauce for these meatballs is really easy. It's just 3 ingredients. I use a Saskatoon berry jam instead of a grape jelly. I do homemade barbecue sauce and honey, and that's it. So once all the meatballs were cooked, I added them to the sauce and mixed them up. Before the buns went into the oven, they got an egg wash and some sesame seeds. And then those bake for like maybe 20 minutes and they're ready. Now that all my elements were ready for this meal, it was time to divide it up. This was the biggest one that I made because I made 3 times batch of it. We got a whole lot of meals out of this. I divided up the meatballs and rice equally, and then I cheated just a little bit and I bought some frozen broccoli from Costco and just added that on the side as the veggie, just to make it a little bit easier on me. This next one was a new recipe. I've made variations of this before, but this particular recipe I had never made. So I was experimenting a little bit, but I wanted to make a great big batch of this because this is something, a hearty pasta like this is a really good thing to have on hand as a quick meal. I've actually never frozen cooked rice before, and I've never frozen cooked noodles before, but it worked really well. This recipe is really simple, and it's one that's great to make for a crowd because it's a one-pot meal. now that I'm thinking about it, I don't remember what was all in the recipe, but I know that it started with some beef and onion sauteing until it was cooked through. And then there was tomato paste and flour added to make the base of a roux. Then I slowly added some homemade chicken broth to this until it became a nice thicker sauce for the macaroni to cook in. Milk and spices were also added to the mix, and then a whole lot of pasta, and then I just covered this and let it simmer until all of the noodles were cooked through and most of the liquid was absorbed. One of my big Christmas presents this year was this food processor. I have never owned a food processor before, but this is one of the main reasons why I wanted one, was so that I could easily shred large amounts of cheese with very little effort. Annie was watching me do this, and every time I sent a block of cheese through, she would go, wow. It was really cute. Anyways, this is a wonderful machine. I'll link it down below. Once the noodles were cooked all the way through, I added a whole bunch of cheese and gave this a very cautious stir because this pot was very, very full. I can't remember if I did a 2 or 3 times batch of this, but it was a lot. I love this one for a crowd because it's just one dish, really easy to put together, doesn't make a huge mess, and it's very hearty and satisfying. Of course, before anything went into the freezer, I made sure to label it so that we had no confusion. Now that the beef recipes are done, we're moving on to the chicken recipes. There is one recipe that calls for chicken breasts and a few recipes that call for just like shredded chicken. So before I really got started cooking today, I made sure to get a whole chicken cooking in the slow cooker just with very basic seasonings so that it could be dressed up later with whatever flavors I needed. Moving on to the butter chicken, this is a recipe I made not too long ago. I also shared it in a video. If you watch my videos, you know what I'm talking about, but this was such a huge hit when I made it for my family that I really wanted to make it here now too. So it started with some marinated chicken. I got that marinating in the morning so that in the afternoon I could do all of the cooking. So in my big pot, I started cooking batches of this chicken, making sure not to overcrowd the pan, and just getting the pieces of chicken browned, not necessarily cooking them all the way just yet. Then to my pot, I'm adding butter and onions and getting those sauteing. Aromatics are added to the mix now. We've got garlic and ginger and many other spices that I cannot remember right now, but will be listed in the recipe link down below. After those have cooked for a little while, I'll add in the rest of the liquid ingredients, which included chicken broth, tomato sauce, and cream. The chicken goes back in, it gets covered, and it cooks for a little while until everything is full of flavor, the chicken is fully cooked through. All the while, I'm making a pot of rice to go with this. Again, I just kept it really simple. I just did butter rice. I like to do cilantro lime rice with the butter chicken, but keeping it simple today because I know not everyone likes cilantro. That's one of those herbs that some people love, some people hate. So I just avoided it altogether. I kept it simple this time with just the rice and the butter chicken. Again, this is a really yummy, comforting meal. Normally I would add maybe a veggie on the side or some naan bread, but I wanted to keep it a little bit more simple today because I was making so many meals. ended up making a few chickens. I think I actually did 3 chickens like this in order to cover all the meals that I was making with shredded chicken. And once the chicken was cooked, I pulled it apart, removed the bones, made chicken broth out of the bones and the skin, and then used the meat for the recipe. So the first one I'm making today is taco soup. And I love this recipe because it is the easiest soup to make. It's basically one of those dump and go kind of soups, which starts off with some onion, butter, garlic, some spices, chicken broth, and then basically just start dumping in things like tomato sauce, corn, black beans, shredded chicken, and you just let it simmer and cook until everything is flavorful. I also really like adding some sugar to this as well. Whenever I make anything with tomatoes, I always add sugar because it helps break down that acidity and balances out the flavors. And this is really yummy. We have it with some cheese on top and some sour cream, some chips on the side. It's so good and easy and warm and comforting. Instead of portioning out the soup individually, I had a few of these plastic 1-liter containers that work really well for freezing things like soup. Now the last recipe I'm making today is enchiladas. This is a really yummy one to have in the freezer. Again, a great one for a crowd, a great way to use up leftover chicken if you have it. And again, I'm making my own homemade tortillas for this, which certainly adds an extra step and a lot of extra time, but to me that's worth it. I'm making a double batch of enchiladas today, which meant I did a double batch of tortillas as well. While the tortillas were cooking, I got started on the enchilada sauce, which is really quite simple, and I'll leave a link down below. It's basically just like creating a roux to make a thicker sauce, adding tomato paste and lots of spices, lots of chili powder. I add some sugar and then some homemade chicken broth, and then just cooking it until it thickens up into a nice sauce. I love enchiladas because the process is really quite simple. You just take your shredded chicken, you pour over your sauce, and then you start filling your tortillas. This one I froze family style because it's one you gotta warm up in the oven. So I took these trays, I spread some enchilada sauce in the bottom, and then I filled each tortilla with a decent amount of the chicken. I sprinkled on some cheese, lightly rolled it up, and put it in the tin. Finish these up, I drizzle on some more enchilada sauce, sprinkle over a lot of cheese, and then these trays didn't come with a lid, so I just covered it generously with saran wrap to keep it fresh, and labeled, of course. Always label anything before it goes into the freezer. And this is what my freezer looked like after all was said and done. We've got the buns in the back, we've got the burgers, and so many individual containers of ready-to-go meals. That's everything for today's video. I hope this inspired you if you're wanting to fill your own freezer with homemade meals, or if you want to bring meals to those in need. These are some really great ideas, meals that we personally love, meals that people around us really enjoy, and meals that freeze really well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.